Welcome to another episode of Let's Code on IBM Expert TV. Today we are hosting a release party for a new book, Practical Cloud Native Java Development with MicroProfile. I am Neil Patterson, your host today, and I am pleased to be joined by the authors of this book. It's great to have all of you here, and we're looking to effectively launch and talk about the new book. So I would love it if you could please take a minute to introduce yourselves, tell the audience a bit about your background and the role that you play. Emily, let's kick it off with you.
Hi, everybody. I am Emily Jiang. I work on Open Liberty and MicroProfile. So I'm the MicroProfile architect. So basically, I spend most of my time working on MicroProfile and also the implementation on Open Liberty. So I'm the Liberty Cloud Native architect. So next, Alastair.
Hi, my name is Alastair Nottingham. I am the Liberty lead architect. That means I work with Emily and everyone else who's a collaborator on this book. And I've been involved in MicroProfile from the very beginning, but not as heavily as Emily.
I'm Andy McCright, and I'm a web services architect for Open Liberty. I work on primarily the RESTful services using like JAX-RS, but I'm also involved in GraphQL, and so I work with the MicroProfile REST client community and the MicroProfile GraphQL community, and I'm also involved with the Jakarta RESTful web services community. John?
Sure, thanks, Andy. So I'm John Alcorn. I'm the only guy here not actually on the Liberty team. I'm more a customer of the Liberty team in a way. So I'm a consultant that is very involved in the cloud native space. So I use Liberty and ping these guys all the time for help when I can't get things to work. Alistair was just helping me this morning, in fact. So I've got a little sample I call the IBM Stock Trader that shows off pretty much all of the MicroProfile features. So it's the sample that's demonstrated throughout the book. So I enjoyed having the time to actually work with the Liberty team on this, and think it turned out pretty well.
Hi, my name's David Chan. I work on the Liberty product as well. Unlike the others, I'm just a developer. And on top of that, I work with the observability and serviceability components of Liberty. So on the MicroProfile side, I'm really concentrated on the MicroProfile metrics piece. That's all.
Sounds great. Well, again, welcome to Let's Code. Let's dig right in. How did this book come about, and who had the initial idea, and then how did they wrangle you all into taking on the challenge of writing it? Let's, Andy, could you maybe take that?
Sure. Emily will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Emily had kind of struck up a relationship with some of the publishers, with Pack Publishing, and kind of came up with the idea that we really needed a book about how to build modern applications with MicroProfile. And then she kind of tapped the rest of us and suggested that we help out in kind of in our areas of expertise. And she did most of the outline and most of the lining up of who does what, and from there we just got to write.
Cool.
Yeah, I will add something. So this is bring back good memories or bad memories. So it's the kind of November last year. I was contacted by Packet. They said, "Oh, do you want? I saw your contribution in MicroProfile. Do you want to write a book on MicroProfile?" I was really busy with the release, MicroProfile for the old release, and then I said, okay, let's chat again after the 4.0 release finished. And then that's kind of become it's nearly Christmas, and then I said, oh, I need a break. Actually, I need a break. I need to go and visit friends and etc. And then suddenly the whole UK lockdown, and I said, no, you're not allowed to get out of the house. And then I had nothing to do. I thought, oh, maybe I should go and sit down to work on the book. So basically, like a package team, and the manager is really very helpful. So it's basically we had many calls, and eventually it's kind of because I had nothing to do. I had some vacation, but not going anywhere. So I spent probably 2 weeks and draw the outline, and then I thought, oh, okay, I really want to get other different perspectives. I like this structure. I want to make it practical, and so it's kind of I design all the chapters. I said, okay, I need Andy, help out with the JAX and GraphQL aspect, and then I need David, to help with observation aspect. Also, we want to use because MicroProfile is just APIs. We need to use a runtime. Obviously, we have experience in Open Liberty, and also I'm a really great fan for Open Liberty. I just believe Open Liberty is one of the best, like a MicroProfile implementation. And then we need someone like Alice there, knows the Open Liberty inside out. So it's basically, and then I said, okay, this book needs to be practical. I think there's a lot of book is just focus on the theory, and but when you write a book, it's so what is the kind of how can I use this to help me in my daily job? Then I thought, okay, John is a perfect a person because he worked with the customers day in and day out. Also, he designed the work on stock trader. So why don't we use that give a customer very good user experience? So that's why the whole team came together. I have to tell you, this is a dream team. I just it's worked out so smooth, and then I just I really enjoyed working with all of the authors, and I learned so much as well.
So I have a guilty admission, Emily. When you pinged me on Slack and asked me if I could help out with the book, I came away from the discussion very much thinking, oh, I'll just review a couple of chapters and that'll be it, and I'll be done. And I didn't realize I had signed myself up for 2 chapters.
Cool. So, Emily, you were coordinating things and kind of laying out the effort. It sounds like you did this book in record time. I've been a part of a number of other books that we've written from an IBM perspective, and they all seem to take a little bit longer, quite a bit longer actually than this. So kudos to all of you for really jumping in and getting it done. Maybe one benefit of the pandemic, if we can call it that, is that you were able to spend time working on this book. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually it's a kind of pandemic, and not all the bad things also bring some good things. So it's
right. I know that many of you have a copy of the book. I wondered if you could hold it up for our audience just to let them see a physical book. Many of the people are reading ebooks these days, so it is available. Throughout our time today, you'll be getting we'll be sharing links for the books and a couple of other things we'll be talking about throughout our talk. So be sure to click on the link. You can get a book for your physical or ebook copy for yourself. That kind of leads me to maybe you can let me know what's happening in the cloud native and Java ecosystems that made this the right time for this type of book. David, maybe you could start that conversation off.
I think I might defer that to Emily. She might have a better grasp of the layout on that.
Okay.
Okay. So for cloud native, actually, I was involved in quite a few discussions with people, and in the conferences, like even 2 years ago, people debating, is cloud native microservice? Is microservice cloud native? And all kind of thing. And then eventually saying, oh, actually, just last year, microservice is not going to solve all the problem. And you shouldn't rush off to do microservices. And so people all confused all over the place. What is cloud native? What is microservice? What should I use? So actually, it's like Alistair also did some talk on what cloud native means. Basically, the cloud native because now is a lot of companies trying to use the cloud, and they want to design cloud native, and then they have confusion. Do they have to do microservice? Do they have to migrate their application to be microservice and then push it to the cloud? So basically, we define the cloud native as long as your app can perform well in the cloud. It's the modular monolith is also cloud native. So it's Open Liberty provide a really good tool for the application to be packaged as a cloud native application. So now I think is a lot of companies started focus on cloud native. So they realized actually cloud native not only microservices and also including the modular monoliths. So that's why it's the ideal time for us to publish this book, Practical Cloud Native Application Development.
Great. Alistair, anything to add based on your talks that you've been given?
Well, I haven't given a talk for, it feels like a long time, because I decided that when the pandemic hit, I would take a little break from presenting, just to give myself some me time. Yep. Then I agreed to write the book. But I agree with Emily. I think a few years ago it was like cloud native equals microservices, and what people actually try doing things, people see a lot of value in cloud and Kubernetes, but they don't necessarily end up being successful applying microservices as an architecture. So there's a more realization that there are different architectural styles that can apply in cloud, and not monoliths aren't necessarily 100% always a bad thing. Sometimes they may actually be the right approach for you. So, and there is a discussion in the book about some of those considerations.
Okay, great. So now that we've kind of looked at some of the things that were happening in the ecosystem in the Java community, really need to understand specifically who this book is for, and maybe even who wouldn't benefit from reading the book. Any takers?
So everybody should go out and buy it, whether or not it's good for them or not. Just buy it. For me, I think it's really intended. I mean, it's broad in scope, but it's really, I think, intended for developers, for architects, to some degree DevOps, and to some degree admins. But I mean, so it is very practical, and that's one of the things I really like about it, is that unlike a lot of the books out there, it's really hands-on, and so you can dig in and actually play with the technology, play with the observability aspects of it, play with the content, and so it's not for people that don't want to get their hands dirty, right? You need to be able to code. You need to be able to have some experience in this. So for managers, maybe it's better for you to just buy the book for your team.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a great summary. That's a great opinion, Andy. That's awesome. Share one feedback with you. I kind of recommended this book to one of the managers, and then he said, "Oh wow, that's a great book. It's read quite well. I understood it." So it's basically this is what Andy said. It's kind of everybody should be able to understand it because MicroProfile is so simple. Is this is another thing that trying to help another like a customer to adopt a MicroProfile. So their team has a COBOL background. I said they want to switch to Java. I said MicroProfile is ideal, like a programming model to learn because full of annotations is kind of you just like need to focus on business logic and then add a few annotations, and then Open Liberty can handle all the on the complex for you. So it's a so it's a please go to buy this book, and we had a really good reviews published on Amazon. So go and read it. So it's that's great. It give you different perspective.
Very cool. There are two topics that or words that you keep using throughout the discussion that I think are key. One is MicroProfile. It's in the title of the book, but then also Open Liberty as an implementation, and maybe we could touch on that a little bit. Why is it so important for a developer to be able to choose to use MicroProfile? And on the flip side of that, what is it about Open Liberty and its support from MicroProfile that you that makes it the right choice? Alistair, Open Liberty architect, maybe you can start us off.
Wow, so there's two very big topics there. So I can't even remember the first one.
MicroProfile.
MicroProfile. So I mean, the idea behind MicroProfile originally was kind of twofold. One was to look at for new applications. If somebody's building a new application, what APIs for Java APIs are there that can exist and be used in a standards-based way. And what we mean by standards in this case is that something that is defined in a way that there can be multiple different implementations, and it allows for multiple different implementations. And I think that everyone can get involved in the evolution of, and that was where that was kind of the starting point. There was also a slight aspect of, at the time, Java EE hadn't had an update in an awful long time, and it was obvious that there were some areas from a cloud native perspective where it was lacking. So MicroProfile was also hoping to, and did manage to deliver some things that could apply to those existing APIs. And allow those APIs to be used inside of cloud native environments. And I think we've been pretty successful in defining those APIs and getting quite wide-ranging groups of people implementing them. Emily, would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. We have around a dozen implementations, and then people customers asking, why MicroProfile over Spring? So the big major the reason is MicroProfile is open standard. So there's many implementations for you to choose from. There's no vendor lock-in. So if you don't like one, if you have a company merge and etc., and then it's if it's kind of the parent company say, oh, okay, we have this license, and maybe you can directly port your application to a different application server. So off you go. So it's the other thing, the job security. Once you learn this, you can do so many things, right? You just it's like a learn once, use everywhere.
Right. And speaking of the implementation, Open Liberty, how is support for that going with MicroProfile?
So, well, I mean, Emily leads the as well as the leading IBM's engagement in the standards. She also kind of leads the delivery of the implementation. and it leads to some interesting discussions between Emily and I, because I have my hat on what do I think is right for Liberty, and Emily has a hat on what's right for MicroProfile. But we both, one thing we both agree on is the importance of keeping Liberty at the leading edge of the MicroProfile evolution. And a good example of this is more recent versions of Kubernetes have this concept of a startup probe. Previous versions did have liveness and readiness, and I actually don't know if the book was able to cover this particular aspect. David might know, because this was happening just as we were finishing up the book. But Kubernetes came out with the idea of a startup probe, which links with MicroProfile Health, and the Liberty implements the most recent versions of the specification. We were very quick to do it, which means that people who use Liberty and MicroProfile Health can exploit and integrate very easily with the MicroProfile Health and the startup probe. And the reason that's important is because beforehand people used to have to choose if they want to find out whether an application has reached its state ready to serve the first request. They would either have to use the liveness probe or the readiness probe. And the readiness probe is there to say, hey, I can't handle traffic right now. Something's going on and I temporarily can't it, but don't restart me because it's temporary. And liveness is something's gone horribly wrong, throw me away and start over, because I'm not going to be able to deal with anything in the future. And during startup, a liveness probe doesn't really fit within the whole idea of starting. A readiness probe seems better, although the Kubernetes documentation at times says use a liveness probe for startup. But then if your application, some people in their applications, they want to go and do some heavyweight processing, like pre-filling caches that can take a bit of time. And that means that they had to configure the probes that they were already using to do the startup with a longer kind of period to allow for this startup activity than is really ideal at runtime, because you tend to want to be fairly quick at stopping routing in a readiness probe or restarting a pod in a liveness probe. And that's where the startup probe came in. And because Liberty supported it very, very quickly, it means people just using Liberty are able to switch their application to use the startup probe and get better behavior within the cloud native environment. And that's really important from both Emily and I's perspective, that when these enhancements come, that we can deliver them to developers as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably just went and take away David's opportunity to talk. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anything to add, David?
Oh, I guess just the question that Alistair put in, but yeah, we did manage to get it into the chapter. Otherwise, we could claim that it was a book for 4.1 MicroProfile.
Yeah, so this is a highlight of this is another amazing highlight for this book, because when we started, we said, okay, MicroProfile 4.0, and then we were writing the book and we released 4.1, and it's a great job, David, and put in the 4.1 update in the chapter, and then we released the book. Actually, it's only a few weeks after the 4.1 was released. So this is amazing. Oh, the other thing I want to add is we use Open Liberty, because I'm driving the I drove the 4.1 release in MicroProfile. We use Open Liberty to be able to release the spec. Again, is happening like 5.0 is kind of make a MicroProfile align with the Jakarta 9.1. And again, I'm using Open Liberty to trying to release 5.0 as well. So you can see Open Liberty is the front runner for like a MicroProfile.
That's terrific.
And one of the nice things about what we've done with Liberty that really helps here is, people typically think about enterprise Java runtimes as being kind of big and large and heavyweight. And what we've managed to do with Liberty is we've managed to provide a kind of a la carte approach to making use of the APIs. So if you want to just use parts of MicroProfile, you can. If you want to use bits of MicroProfile and you want to use some, JPA for persistence, which isn't part of MicroProfile's definition, you absolutely can. And by doing that, you're not dragging in things like, I'm sorry to anyone who's a big fan of SOAP, but you're not pulling in web services or EJB into an environment just because you want to pull JPA in, and that's kind of a huge benefit to Liberty.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
On that topic, a colleague of mine and I will be presenting at EclipseCon later this month on just that very topic. We have a presentation where we pull MicroProfile, GraphQL, and JPA, throw them together and show you how you can make some really cool application with two technologies from two different organizations. And that's something that, as far as I know, Liberty is the only server that can easily do that without giving you the whole kitchen sink, right?
Yeah.
You get just one.
Or without requiring you to kind of do all the heavy lifting of working out how to make GraphQL and JPA work nicely together.
Right.
And we do it with finesse. So the memory footprint and throughput is good, which, from a development perspective, when you're doing development, throughput isn't necessarily a huge consideration because you tend to only be putting a small number of requests through. But it's really important when you start going into production that you're as efficient as possible.
Right. Yeah, EclipseCon's coming up in 2 weeks or so. Please, make sure to sign up for that and visit Andy's session. That sounds good. We haven't heard from John, and so I wanted to raise a question for John. Basically, this book is more practical than some of the others. We've had some discussion on that already, and it uses Stock Trader, the Stock Trader app. Yep. My understanding from those on the call is that this app has been around for a while in different flavors. I've mentioned SOAP, EJBs, etc. So the real question is, how long have you been working on this app? Maybe that'll date yourself a little bit. And then secondly, what lessons have you learned as you've been working with it and bringing it forward to now being used in the book?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I've been working on it since I think about 2016. So initially it started out as this just very small little example. It had like 3 microservices just to show here's how to make a call from one to another, and like call a database and call a web service or something. And then over time, it's just kind of grown. People would come to me and say, hey, can you use it to show off, my favorite product or whatever. So, over time, I added support for talking to MQ, or I added support for talking to Kafka or whatever. So, it's grown up over time. It's up to around a dozen microservices now. Some of them have different flavors available of them. But the nice thing I like about MicroProfile, just to add on to what Alistair was saying a moment ago, is it essentially takes, these big Java application servers that we've worked with for decades and, makes them good citizens in the cloud era. So, my view is, any cloud native application these days should be targeting some implementation of Kubernetes. And really MicroProfile is what helps you plug into, and be a good Kubernetes citizen. Alistair talked about plugging into all the health checks. That's important. It gives you the ability to plug into all the metrics generation that goes on, for a Prometheus server or for, an Instana or CloudWatch or whatever. It produces all that without you having to really do work on your part. It produces open tracing records for Jaeger, and it does lots of things for you. So one of the things I've enjoyed at MicroProfile is a lot of it you get for free. You just turn on the feature in your server XML and you've got a default implementation. You can then go provide a custom implementation if you want to do that. But if you aren't that enterprising from the very start and just want to do something simple, just turn on the features and use the default implementation for a startup probe, or use the default metrics that the JVM produces if you don't want to create some custom metrics or whatever. So much of MicroProfile, it's helping you plug in. it's not putting a lot of burden on you initially. It's a very simple programming model. In most cases, it's just a few annotations you put on classes or on methods to make things happen. But then when you need to do something fancier, you have the ability to do that. You can write a custom health probe. You can write application-defined metrics to show up in a dashboard and so on. So I really like that ability to get your feet wet with something simple, but to have more power behind you, when you need it to do some heavier lifting. But just to finish up what you were saying about StockTrader, we often use it just to show customers, look, we know what we're doing in this cloud native space. Here's an example of an application. A lot of people, you end up, when you look up things, you find hello world level samples, and those are good for certain little simple things. But when you're needing to show a call path, from one microservice to another, and how to see that in a tracing engine or something, you need more than just a hello world. You need something that is closer to what a customer would put into production. So StockTrader, we try to keep it in this midway point where it shows off a lot more than a hello world, but it's not as complicated as some apps you put into production. So It tries to stay in the middle where it's a good learning example. It's all open source, so anyone can go out and look at it. It's evolving. I'm committing to it all the time. Some of my colleagues are as well. And one of the things I'll point out is originally we just created it for IBM Cloud, and it runs great there. But lately we've been trying it out in some of the other clouds. So I've been running it in AWS in their Elastic Kubernetes service, and that's been working great. I switched it from DB2 to using PostgreSQL in the relational data service in Amazon. That worked great. I'm moving it to Azure now and trying out its messaging support. And so we're trying to show, hey, look, we can run in anyone's cloud. We certainly, customers that want to use the IBM cloud, we highly recommend that. But we understand some customers are going to pick other ones, and StockTrader can help demonstrate that even in those cases.
Right. Kind of picking up on what Alistair was saying, it's that underlying Kubernetes support and then tying into that allows us to really move across the cloud spectrum, so to speak, and be able to run quite quickly with those applications. It's great to hear that application is always being updated to reflect some of the newer things that are coming along, and exciting to hear about MicroProfile 5 aligning with Jakarta 9.1. That's a great initiative as well. A question for everybody, and getting back to focusing on your book writing experience. How was it? How did you think it went? How long did it take you? And I guess the $1 million question is, would you write another one? So maybe David, you could kick us off with that.
Yeah, I think I was pretty stressed out, to be honest.
Okay.
I think the first night I started to write, I think the entire evening I wrote maybe like a paragraph or two, and I thought to myself, I'm never going to hit this deadline. But I think over time, like, you kind of pick up pace, you get comfortable with writing, such a large amount in detail. And yeah, it's been an interesting experience. It's my first book, if anything. I don't know about the others, but yeah, I mean, it's been fun, especially working with such a great team.
Good.
I'll go next. For me, it was the first chapter I did was right in my wheelhouse. So it was Jack's RS and basically getting to talk about something that I was passionate about. So getting started wasn't the problem. I was able to crank out a lot of pages pretty quickly. In fact, the first problem I had was that when I went back to the editor, they told me I was over by about 20 pages and I needed to cut some. So that was my first problem, was that I was just too verbose, and I had to figure out how to trim it to still get all the information across, but kind of lose some of the extras or make links or whatever to kind of reduce that content. Once I got that first chapter done, though, it was so like David, I was, it was kind of stressful to kind of meet that deadline. And so once I got it done, I kind of relaxed, and it was so hard to get going on that second chapter. And so I had to, I mean, that was tougher for me, because the second chapter I did was chapter 11 on GraphQL. And I love talking about GraphQL, but it was sort of like looking back, I was like, wow, that really was a lot of time spent on that. So it took a little while to get back into the groove. But once, kind of like what David was saying, once I kind of got into the groove, then it made it easier.
Right.
I agree about the needing to get into the groove, and it can be hard to get into it. I think when you really know the subject very well, like Andy did with his first chapter, it's much easier to do. And I completely kind of understand the whole trying to keep it within the right topic. Because in my second chapter, because I only wrote 2 chapters, so I wrote less than everyone else, I think. But in my second chapter, I had trouble with like the first third of it, and then the second third of it was way too big, and then I got onto the last third of it, and it's because I had a lot to say about the second thing, and I was just typing and typing, and it was coming out and out and out, and I had no idea how much I'd written. I found I as to whether I'd do it again, I think I'd probably do it again as long as it was with a group. But I'm not sure the publishers would want to, because I was very bad with almost every single deadline. I had a very early deadline for my first chapter, which I think I kind of met. But I was writing the chapter like the weekend before it was due, so I was like right up until the deadline. And I remember I was like this in university. If I had an assignment, I'd be working on my assignment until like the time it had to be submitted. I'm terrible with time management. And on the second one, I don't know what happened, but I suddenly realized that my deadline for submission was actually a month ago, and I hadn't even started thinking about it, because there was such a big gap between the two. I like wrote the first, and oh, that's fine, it's all done. I've got months before I need to worry about the second one. I've got other things to do. There's a great Netflix show on. Yeah, so they were quite worried about my second chapter, because I don't know if they just didn't do as good a job reviewing it, because I got a lot less feedback on it than my first chapter, or it was just amazingly that much better than the first chapter. Right. But yeah, I'm not good at deadlines. I think they would hate to have me back.
Hey, John, how about you?
Yeah, I pretty much echo what the others said. I mean, it was daunting at first when you're first starting out and you're trying to figure out what to do. You're like, oh my, I've signed up for 3 chapters and I don't know what to write. Because you're sitting there with kind of this blank Microsoft Word, and you're like, okay, what should I say first? But once I got into it, it all just kind of started to flow, because, like we said earlier, if it's a topic you know a lot about, and in my case, it was me talking about my application I've worked on for the past 4 or 5 years. Stuff just starts coming out, so, and I tried to be judicious with putting in screenshots and things like that. I wanted to, show a few things off, but not just totally be a point and click tutorial. But yeah, I got more comfortable as we went on. I got the first chapter out, and then I had 2 chapters in a row, chapters 8 and 9, I had to get out. I felt some of the time crunch that Alistair was talking about. One thing I'll point out is this was all considered on your own time work, so this wasn't IBM granting us a certain amount of our week, each week to go work on this. We all had our full-time jobs, so most of this was done, in the evenings after dinner, or on weekends. That made for busy time, because like I said, you had your full-time job and then all this work. But yeah, the later chapters went faster for me. So I feel like if I were to go at this to do another book, like the others said, if I was working with a great team like we were this time, I think I'd be game for that. And I don't think it would seem so daunting now that I've been through the experience of having done it once.
Cool. And finally, Emily, the ringleader.
Yeah, I'm the I'm the one to be blamed. Basically, I think I spend the most time. Like I started from like a Christmas time, and then finished probably like last minute. Maybe it's, I think it's August. To be honest, I think is I spend the most evenings and the weekends. So I spend the most. I think is every night I try to write some paragraph and etc. Because I couldn't stop. Once stop, I find that it's difficult to get back to it. The other thing is because I'm the organizer, so I can't. I need to show to be a role model. If I'm late to like I haven't done good job, nobody going to like follow my lead and etc. So I need to like demonstrate, yeah, I can do it, and also pretend I is a piece of cake. So it's but I spend a lot of time. And sometimes I say, oh, Alistair, I need to remind you, you need to get it started. So
Right.
it's a kind of the I think the other thing is because when I first started, I envisioned okay. For normal people, like know nothing about MicroProfile, how much time they want to spend to read each chapter. So I define, oh, this chapter 20 pages, no more. And then it's like as Andy said earlier, and similar to like John. And once it's the same problem I have. Once you get started, like I talk about 5 things. Actually, I spend like 20 pages to talk about the first thing. So I have to delete, and yeah, I think I spend a lot of time overrode and had to delete things. Yeah, but I think is I will do it again. I thoroughly enjoyed being in a great team, because one thing is like I distribute the work, and also is that I know they can do the good job. They can be trusted and etc. So it's also we review each other's topic. I enjoyed that as well because I got really good feedback because they know the area quite well and etc. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I think I reflect back. I think that's really good experience, and yeah, the time well spent.
Good.
I,
Good.
I think if I were to do one thing differently, it's I would pass on writing the first chapter in the book, because the first chapter in the book, I felt like there was a lot of pressure on my shoulders, because it's the, other than the like the dedication, the foreword stuff, it's the first thing people read. And I ended up with that chapter, and I felt that very difficult as a result, because it's like it's probably the least practical of the chapters, because it's not talking about coding and Kubernetes and doing stuff. It's talking about the conceptual stuff. So I felt like it's the one chapter that doesn't necessarily fit the title, and but it's also kind of important for setting up some of the context for the rest of the book, and it's the first thing people read. So if people don't like what I wrote, they won't continue to read what anyone else wrote.
We can blame you now.
Yeah.
Yes, but one of the reviews did comment that they liked the first part of the book.
Yeah.
I like to interpret that as the first chapter as opposed to the first section, which is not, I'm sorry for you other people who contributed to the first section, but I think it was all me.
Good stuff. So our audience is asking whether they can get a copy. I did share a link, and we have shared a link to where you can get that get the book. IBM.biz MicroProfile book is that link. So please go and get it. You can get an e-copy, or you can get the physical copy. And I'm sure our authors would be pleased to have everybody read the book. I will note that at some of our upcoming events that we'll be actually giving this book out. So if you stop by an IBM booth at your favorite Java or Kubernetes event coming up, stop by. We may be able to even have one of our authors, one or more of our authors, sign it. So please stop by and see us. We're pretty much on time, so I think I'll just conclude our session today by thanking you all for coming on and helping us to.
Oh, one more thing.
Yep.
We have great news. We have some
okay.
giveaways. We have two book to give away and 3 ebooks to give away. For
how do we
our
do that?
So after this show, please follow Open Liberty Twitter handle, and if you follow the Open Liberty Twitter handle by Monday next week, we are going to choose randomly choose 5 followers Open Liberty at Open Liberty IO. We will choose five winners, and then we will directly DM you, and then it's kind of going to get your contact details and send a copy to you. So two physical copy and 3 ebooks to give away. So Neil, you put the Open Liberty IO. So we are going to tweet send a Twitter message, and please follow this Twitter handle right now, straight away, before you forget. So it's we will stop on the Monday morning, so we will choose the winner.
Great.
So that's include if you follow Open Liberty already, and you are eligible to be the winner as well.
Sounds good. So a couple of people will get their copy just by following Open Liberty on Twitter. So again, thank you for coming on the Let's Code show. We speaking of Open Liberty, we actually have a session next Thursday. Jamie Coleman, one of our developer advocates, will be coming on and talking about some of the stuff we've talked about today, actually running how to use Open Liberty to develop cloud-native applications on various clouds. We're starting with IBM Cloud this coming Thursday, but we'll be looking at Azure and AWS in future weeks. So please join us next week for another episode of Let's Code. And once again, thank you to our authors for participating today. With that, I will sign off, and thank you to our audience.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you all.